The Galactic Council had existed for 12,000 years. It was the oldest and most powerful group in the known universe. 47 different alien species sat in the Great Hall, a massive room carved from living crystal on a planet called Nexus Prime. The walls glowed with soft blue light. The ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed inside. Every species that mattered had a seat here. The tall insect-like creatures with hard shells and clicking voices controlled most of the trade routes. The massive beings made of living rock provided military strength. The small and bird-like were known for their science. The quiet and thoughtful kept the histories of all species. For thousands of years they had made decisions together. They traded technology. They shared star maps. They protected each other from threats. They believed they had seen everything the universe could offer. Then humanity arrived. The human ship was small and ugly. It looked like a metal box with engines attached. It could barely travel faster than light, using technology that the Council species had abandoned centuries ago. When it entered the Nexus Prime system, the defense stations almost destroyed it by accident. They had never seen anything so primitive try to reach them. But the Council had rules. Any new species that achieved faster-than-light travel had the right to speak. One representative, one speech, one chance to prove their worth. Ambassador Park walked into the Great Hall with her head held high. She was a small woman with black hair tied back in a simple style. She wore a dark blue uniform with no decorations. Behind her walked her aide, a young man named Doha, carrying a simple data device. The alien delegates watched her with various expressions. The clicked their jaws in a way that showed amusement. The shifted their massive bodies, clearly bored. The whispered to each other in their musical language. None of them expected anything important from this soft, weak-looking creature. Stepped onto the central platform. A beam of light surrounded her, and her voice was translated instantly into every language in the room. She began to speak. She told them about Earth, a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star. She described humanity's history with honesty. She did not hide the wars, the suffering, the times when humans had nearly destroyed themselves. She spoke of the great conflicts that had killed millions. She admitted that even now, humans sometimes fought each other over foolish things. But she also told them about human music, about songs that made people cry with joy or sadness, about instruments made from wood and metal that created sounds no computer could copy. She described paintings that captured single moments of beauty and kept them alive for centuries. She told them about human stories, tales of heroes and villains, of love and loss, of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. She explained how humans shared these stories around fires for thousands of years before they ever dreamed of reaching the stars. She spoke of human hope. Despite every war, every plague, every disaster, humans always rebuilt. They always tried again. They looked at the darkness and chose to light candles instead of cursing it. Finally, she made her offer. "We do not have advanced technology to trade," said. Her voice was calm and clear. "We do not have rare resources or military power, but we have our culture, our art, our music, our stories. We offer to share everything we are with the Galactic Council. In return, we ask only for basic star maps. We want to learn, we want to grow, we want to be your friends." She stopped speaking and waited. The Great Hall was silent for a moment, allowed herself a small hope. Perhaps they understood. Perhaps they saw the value in what humanity offered. Then the high speaker made a sound. It started low, a clicking rattle from deep in his throat. The translation device turned it into laughter, loud, mocking laughter. Others joined. The rumbled like distant thunder. The chirped in high-pitched amusement. Even the usually quiet pulsed their throat sacs in what their species used for laughter. The sound filled the great hall. It bounced off the crystal walls and came back even louder. Hundreds of aliens from dozens of species, all laughing at the small human woman standing alone on the platform. Doha gripped his data device so hard that his fingers turned white. His jaw was tight with anger, but he said nothing. He had been trained for this moment, even if he had hoped it would not come. Did not move. Her face showed nothing. She stood like a statue while the laughter washed over her. The high speaker finally controlled himself enough to speak. "You offer us art," he said, his voice still shaking with amusement. "Stories and songs. Little human, the council trades in real things. Technology that can reshape worlds. Resources that power civilizations. Military alliances that protect entire species." He leaned forward, his multiple eyes focusing on her. "What use do we have for the scribblings of a species that still kills itself over patches of dirt? Your paintings cannot power a starship. Your songs cannot stop a weapon. Your stories cannot feed a hungry world." More laughter. Someone made a joke in a language the translator did not catch, and a whole section of the hall erupted in new amusement. Waited until it was quiet enough to speak. "We offer what we have," she said. Her voice had not changed at all. "Then you have nothing," the high speaker replied. He waved one of his many arms in dismissal. "The council recognizes that your species exists, nothing more. Return to your little planet. Come back when you have something of actual value, perhaps in a few thousand years when you have grown up." The laughter started again, as guards moved toward the platform to escort the humans out. Turned and walked toward the exit. She did not hurry. She did not look down. Doha followed her, his young face burning with shame and anger. As they reached the great doors, one of the delegates called out, "Perhaps they can entertain us while we eat. Humans, will you sing for your supper?" The hall exploded in the loudest laughter yet. The doors closed behind the human delegation. The sound cut off instantly. The hallway was cold and silent. Doha finally spoke. "Ambassador, I am so sorry. They had no right to." Raised her hand, stopping him. Her face was still calm, but Doha saw something in her eyes that he had never seen before. It was not anger. It was not sadness. It was something harder and colder than either. "Remember this moment," she said quietly. "Remember every laugh. Remember every word. Write it all down when we return to the ship." "Why?" Doha asked. Looked back at the closed doors. Beyond them, she could still hear the faint sound of alien amusement. "Because someday," she said, "they will wish they had listened. And when that day comes, I want humanity to remember exactly how the galaxy welcomed us." She turned and walked toward the docking bay. Her steps were steady. Her back was straight. Behind her, the laughter continued. But it would not continue forever. The human ship left Nexus Prime 3 hours after the council meeting. It did not request permission to depart. It did not file a flight plan. It simply powered up its primitive engines and flew away into the darkness between stars. The Galactic Council did not notice. They had already forgotten about the small delegation and their foolish offer. There were real matters to discuss. Trade agreements needed signing. Border disputes needed solving. The business of running a galaxy did not stop for one failed species. 3 standard years passed. The Council expected humanity to return. Young species always came back. They would be humbler the second time. They would offer something real in exchange for knowledge. Perhaps they had found some rare mineral on their planet. Perhaps they would offer workers for the labor-intensive jobs that more advanced species avoided. But the human ship did not return. No messages came from Earth. No requests for reconsideration. No desperate pleas for help or guidance. The communication channels that humanity had used to announce their arrival went completely silent. Counselor No Jinnah had replaced Ambassador Park as humanity's official contact with the galaxy. When the Council finally decided to check on Earth's status, they sent a standard inquiry. Just a simple question asking about humanity's intentions. Jinnah's response arrived 2 days later. It was exactly 23 words long. Humanity has heard the Council's assessment. We will not trouble you with our worthless offerings again. We wish you well. The channel closed. When Council communications officers tried to reopen it, they found nothing but static. The high speaker read the message and made a sound that translated as a snort. "Good," he said. "Perhaps they have finally learned their place. Let them stay on their little world and play with their paintings." For the first few years, no one thought about humanity at all. They were simply too small to matter. One planet. A handful of slow colony ships moving toward nearby stars. Technology so primitive it was barely functional. In a galaxy of thousands of species and millions of worlds, humans were a rounding error. But then the reports started coming in. A trading convoy was traveling through an empty sector when raiders attacked. The raiders were fast and well armed. The captain sent emergency signals to every ship in range, begging for help as his crew died around him. A human ship was nearby, close enough to help. Its sensors were clearly active. The captain could see it on his screens, watching. He called out to them directly. "Human vessel, we are under attack, please assist." The human ship did not respond. It stayed in position for the entire battle. Its weapons were powered up. Its targeting systems were active. It recorded everything with military-grade sensors. When the raiders finally left and rescue ships arrived, they found the captain alive but badly wounded. He told them about the human vessel. "They could have helped," he said, his voice weak. "They were right there, but they just watched like we were animals in a nature documentary." The human ship had already left. It answered no questions. It filed no reports. 6 months later, a research station suffered a terrible accident. Something went wrong with the main power core. Radiation flooded the station. Scientists sent desperate calls for help as they tried to seal damaged sections and save their colleagues. A human patrol ship detected the emergency signals. It arrived at the station in less than 4 hours, faster than any Council vessel could have reached. It stopped exactly 1,000 kilometers away and did nothing. For 6 days, the human ship sat there while they struggled to survive. It did not answer their calls. It did not offer supplies or medical help. It did not even send a simple message of encouragement. What it did do was deploy sensor stations. Small floating devices that recorded everything happening on the station, every death, every desperate repair attempt, every failed effort to contact the silent human vessel. When rescue ships finally arrived, the human vessel collected its sensors and left. The data it had gathered was never shared with anyone. "What are they doing?" the high speaker demanded in a private council session. "What game are they playing?" No one had answers. Over the next decade, similar reports came from across the galaxy. Human ships appearing at disaster sites, battles, and emergencies, always watching, never helping, recording everything with obsessive detail. They seemed to be everywhere at once. Council intelligence officers tried to track their movements but found it impossible. The humans had learned to mask their engine signatures. They could appear and disappear like ghosts. And they never spoke, not one word to any Council species for 10 long years. The ambassador requested a private meeting with the high speaker. She was an old female, her scales gray with age, but her mind was still sharp. "I have been studying the pattern," she said. "The human activities follow a specific logic." "What logic?" the high speaker asked. "They are clearly insane." "No," they replied. "They are learning. Every incident they observe teaches them something. They are studying how we fight, how we respond to emergencies, how we coordinate or fail to coordinate our efforts." She pulled up a star map showing human over the past decade. "Look at where they position themselves, always at perfect observation points, always close enough to see everything but far enough to escape if threatened. They are gathering intelligence on a massive scale." The high speaker's clicking slowed as he processed this. Intelligence for what purpose? The old eyes met his. I do not know, but I know this. We laughed at them for offering art and culture. We told them they had nothing of value. Now they are silently watching our every weakness and we cannot stop them. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Ambassador Park asked only for star maps in exchange for friendship. We gave her mockery instead. I find myself wondering what humanity would have asked for after 1,000 years of partnership. Instead, we will discover what they ask for after 1,000 years of silence. The High Speaker wanted to dismiss her concerns. He wanted to believe that humanity was simply a minor annoyance, too primitive to matter. But that night, alone in his quarters, he pulled up the recording of that long-ago council meeting. He watched the small human woman standing calmly while the entire galaxy laughed at her. He watched her face as she turned to leave. And for the first time he felt something cold settle in his stomach. It was not quite fear, not yet. But it was close. Outside, somewhere in the vast darkness of space, human ships continued their silent patrol, watching, waiting, learning, and not saying a single word. 50 years had passed since Ambassador Park walked out of the council hall. 50 years of complete silence. 50 years without a single word spoken between humanity and the Galactic Council. 50 years in which the galaxy slowly realized that something strange was happening at the edge of known space. The reports came slowly at first. Neutral traders who wandered into human territory. Long-range observation posts that caught glimpses of human activity. Spies who never returned but managed to send fragments of data before they vanished. The picture they painted was impossible. It was terrifying. Humanity had not stayed on their little planet waiting to grow up. They had been busy. 17 worlds now flew human flags. 17 colonies spread across 3 different star systems. Not large colonies, humans still numbered only in the billions, but permanent settlements with growing populations. The council species had colonized worlds for thousands of years. They had developed sophisticated terraforming technology. They could transform dead rocks into paradise gardens within a century. Humans had none of this technology, so they found another way. On frozen worlds, they built cities under massive domes. They heated the air with nuclear reactors and grew food under artificial lights. On worlds with poisonous atmospheres, they constructed sealed habitats and filtered every breath through mechanical systems. On worlds with crushing gravity, they modified their own bodies over generations, becoming shorter and denser until they could walk normally. It was brutal work. Many died in the early years. Entire colonies were lost to accidents, diseases, and equipment failures. But humans kept coming. They kept building. They kept adapting. They are like insects, an observer reported. You crush one and 10 more appear. You destroy their nest and they build a new one. They do not know how to give up. The technology reports were even more disturbing. Human weapons had evolved far beyond anything the Council expected. They had no elegant plasma cannons or gravity manipulation devices. Instead, they had perfected the art of making things move very, very fast. Their main weapon was something called a mass driver, a simple device that used magnetic fields to accelerate dense metal rods to incredible speeds. Nothing fancy, nothing sophisticated, just basic physics applied with brutal efficiency. A single human mass driver round, traveling at half the speed of light, could punch through any shield the Council had developed. It could split a warship in half. It could crack a small moon. Primitive weapons, the military council insisted. Our shields can handle such things. But test after test proved them wrong. Human weapons did not care about shield technology. They were too simple to be confused by electronic countermeasures. They moved too fast to be shot down. And humans had built thousands of them. Admiral commanded the human military forces. He was a quiet man who rarely smiled. When a neutral observer asked about human military philosophy, he gave a simple answer. "Every species in the galaxy has better technology than us," he said. "Faster ships, stronger shields, more powerful weapons. We cannot match you in any of these areas, so we do not try." The observer asked what humans did instead. His eyes were cold. "We accept losses that would break other species. We train until our pilots can fight without thinking. We build redundant systems for every critical function, and we never ever stop coming." He paused. "A single human destroyer can be destroyed by any Council warship, but humans do not send single destroyers. We send 20. We send 50. We send as many as needed, and then we send more." The observer noted that this seemed wasteful. "Yes," agreed. "It is wasteful, it is brutal, it is ugly, it is also effective. The question is not whether we can defeat superior technology. The question is whether our enemies can kill enough of us before we reach them. History suggests they cannot." But weapons and colonies were not the strangest thing humanity had built during their 50 years of silence. They had built the archive. Every human colony contained a massive underground facility. Every human ship carried a smaller version. Together, they formed a network that stretched across all of human space. The archive contained everything humanity had ever created, every song ever sung, every story ever told, every painting, sculpture, dance, and poem, every scientific discovery and philosophical thought, every piece of human culture from cave paintings to digital art. It was not just a library, it was a religion. Human children learned archive protocols before they learned mathematics. Every adult was required to contribute something original every year: a song, a story, a piece of craft. The worst crime in human society was destroying cultural works. A captured human pilot was asked about this obsession. Why did humans care so much about preserving art when they were struggling to survive on hostile worlds? The pilot looked at his captors like they were missing something obvious. "You have been alive for millions of years," he said. "You have technology we cannot imagine. You have power we cannot match. But what have you created? What songs do you sing? What stories do you tell your children?" He smiled, though there was no humor in it. "The Council laughed at our culture. They said art cannot power starships or stop weapons. They are right. Art cannot do those things, but it can do something more important. It can tell us who we are. It can remind us what we are fighting for." He leaned forward. "You have spent 50 years wondering what humans want. You have watched us build and grow and prepare, and you cannot understand why. Here is your answer. We are building a civilization worth preserving. Every ship we construct, every weapon we forge, every colony we establish exists to protect human culture from those who would destroy or dismiss it." The pilot was eventually released as part of a prisoner exchange. His words were filed in a council database and mostly forgotten. But the ambassador read them. She read them many times. And she began to understand what was coming. Humanity had been insulted. Humanity had been dismissed. And humanity had responded not with war or with begging, but with something far more dangerous. They had responded with patience. They had built themselves into something that could not be ignored. Not a galactic power, not yet, but a force that would have to be respected. A civilization with its own identity, its own purpose, its own reasons for existing. And still, after 50 years, they had not spoken a single word to the council. The ambassador made a formal request to address the full council. She warned them that humanity was no longer a joke. She warned them that silence was not weakness. She warned them that someday, somehow, the galaxy would need to deal with what humanity had become. The High Speaker thanked her for her concerns and dismissed them. 3 months later, they arrived. And everything changed. They came from somewhere beyond the galaxy. No one knew where. No one knew why. They simply appeared one day at the edge of council space with a fleet larger than anything anyone had ever seen. Their ships were black and organic-looking, like the shells of enormous insects. They moved without visible engines. They communicated on frequencies no translator could interpret. They gave no warnings and accepted no surrenders. They just started killing. The first 3 council systems fell in a single week. They did not want territory or resources or slaves. They wanted nothing the council could understand. They simply moved through space, destroying everything they touched. Whole planets were burned. Populations were harvested, taken aboard the black ships and never seen again. Defense fleets that had protected their species for thousands of years were swatted aside like annoying insects. The Council's response was chaos. The blamed the for weak border defenses. The blamed the for not detecting the threat earlier. The blamed the for ignoring their warnings about unknown energy signatures. Everyone blamed everyone else while they continued their advance. Fleet coordination collapsed completely. Each species pulled their ships back to defend their own worlds. Old alliances meant nothing when survival was at stake. The Great Galactic Council, united for 12,000 years, fell apart in less than a month. By the time anyone thought to work together again, it was too late. 32 council systems had been consumed. Billions of beings were dead or taken. The fleet had grown larger somehow, as if the destruction was feeding it. And still they advanced. It was the who first suggested the impossible. There was directly in the path. They had already evacuated their children and their elders. Their remaining population prepared for a last stand that everyone knew would fail. In desperation, the ambassador stood before what remained of the council and spoke words that would have been unthinkable just months before. "We must contact the humans." Silence filled the chamber, the kind of silence that falls when someone says something both obvious and terrible. The High Speaker refused immediately. "Absolutely not. We will not beg those primitives for help. The Council will handle this threat as we have handled every threat for 12,000 years." "How?" the ambassador demanded. "Our fleets are scattered. Our coordination is broken. We cannot even agree on who should lead the defense. Meanwhile, they grow stronger with every system they take." "The humans are nothing," the High Speaker insisted. "They have 17 worlds, we have thousands. What could they possibly offer?" "Ships," they said quietly. "They have ships. Perhaps not many by our standards, but ships that are crewed by beings who have been training for war while we train for commerce. Ships with weapons that ignore our shields, weapons that might work against shields too." The debate continued for hours. Pride battled fear. Ancient prejudices fought against desperate need. In the end, fear won, but only barely, and only because they reached space the next day. The High Speaker himself authorized the message to humanity. It was carefully worded to avoid anything that might sound like an apology. The Galactic Council requests military consultation with human forces regarding the current emergency situation. In exchange for assistance, the Council offers full partnership status and immediate access to all Council technology and resources. Past misunderstandings between our peoples should be set aside for the greater good of all sentient beings. The message was sent. The Council waited. Ambassador Iamsira received the transmission in her office on Colony 7. She was 73 years old, with gray hair and calm eyes. She had served humanity for 40 years and had never once spoken to a non-human during that time. She remembered the day Ambassador Park returned from Nexus Prime. Sira had been 12 years old, waiting at the spaceport with other children to welcome the delegation home. She remembered his face, not angry, not sad, but empty in a way that had frightened her. That night her parents had explained what happened, the laughter, the dismissal, the mockery of everything humanity valued. Sira had not understood everything at 12, but she understood enough. She understood that the galaxy thought humans were a joke. She understood that humanity would have to prove them wrong. 61 years later, she read the Council's message 3 times. She noted the careful wording that avoided any admission of wrongdoing. She noticed how they offered partnership now, when they needed help, after refusing even basic star maps when humanity asked politely. She thought about what to say. She thought about the 50 years of silence. She thought about every human who had died building colonies on hostile worlds while the Council laughed. She thought about every soldier who had trained for a war they hoped would never come. Then she wrote her response. It was exactly 23 words long, the same length as Counselor No Jinnah's message 50 years before. Sira did not think anyone on the Council would notice the symmetry, but she found it satisfying anyway. Humanity has heard the Council's request. We wish you well. She sent it, then she closed the channel. Within hours, more messages arrived. The Council pleaded. They offered more technology, more resources, more concessions. They used words like partnership and friendship and mutual benefit. Sira did not respond to any of them. The ambassador sent a personal message describing the devastation of his. He begged for help. He apologized for things he had no part in. He offered his own life in exchange for human intervention. Sira read his message. She felt sorry for him. She felt sorry for all the innocent beings who were dying because of decisions made before they were born. But she did not respond. The High Speaker sent a furious message demanding that humanity honor its obligations to sentient life everywhere. He threatened consequences if humans continued to ignore the crisis. Sira almost laughed at that one. What consequences? The Council could barely protect itself. They had no power to threaten anyone. She did not respond. Finally, 3 weeks after the first message, the High Speaker himself sent a private communication. It was not a demand or a threat. It was barely even a request. Please, it said, help us. Sira stared at that single word for a long time. Please. The High Speaker, the most powerful being in the known galaxy, had been reduced to begging. Part of her wanted to help. Despite everything, despite the laughter and the dismissal, she did not want innocent beings to die. But she was not the one who made these decisions. Humanity had spent 50 years building a system that no single person could override. The silence was not her silence. It was humanity's silence, and it would take more than one old woman's sympathy to break it. She wrote her final response and sent it before she could change her mind. The Council dismissed humanity's request for friendship 50 years ago. You called our culture worthless. You told us we had nothing to offer. We accepted your judgment and have not troubled you since. We do not see why that should change now. She paused, then added one more line. We will be watching, as we have watched for 50 years. Perhaps when this is over, we can discuss whether humans have anything of value to offer the galaxy. The channel closed. Somewhere in the darkness of space, the fleet continued its advance. And humanity continued its silence. The battle for Nexus Prime lasted 11 days. They came with a fleet of 500 black ships. They surrounded the crystal planet where the Galactic Council had ruled for 12,000 years. They ignored the defensive stations. They brushed aside the combined fleets of 30 species like they were nothing. Then they began their harvest. The Great Hall where Ambassador Park had once stood was destroyed on the first day. The crystal spires that had glowed with ancient light were shattered into millions of pieces. The archives containing 12,000 years of Council history burned. The High Speaker died in the 3rd hour of the attack. He was still transmitting demands for human assistance when a beam weapon cut through his shelter. His last words were a curse directed at humanity. Around the galaxy, the surviving Council species watched in horror. This was Nexus Prime, the heart of civilization, the unbreakable center of galactic order. If it could fall, anywhere could fall. Human ships observed from a safe distance, as they had observed for 50 years, recording everything, saying nothing. On the 12th day, the finished with Nexus Prime and began moving toward their next target. Behind them, the crystal planet was a dead rock, stripped of everything that had once made it beautiful. The council was broken, its surviving members scattered across refugee fleets, arguing with each other about what to do next. There was no leadership. There was no coordination. There was only fear and blame and the slow understanding that everything they had built was ending. And then the human fleet moved. Not toward Nexus Prime. It was too late for that. Not toward the refugee fleets or the council species begging for protection. General Myra commanded the human forces. She was the granddaughter of Doha, the young man who had stood beside Ambassador Park in the council hall 60 years before. She had grown up hearing stories about that day, about the laughter, about the silence that followed. Now she commanded 300 human warships, ugly, angular vessels bristling with weapons, ships crewed by humans who had trained their entire lives for this moment. Her orders were specific. Humanity would not save the Council. That ship had sailed 50 years ago, but humanity would fight for what mattered to them. The first target was a small planet called Prime. It was the quiet species who kept the histories of all peoples. More importantly, it was home to the largest cultural archive in the galaxy outside of human space. The fleet approaching Prime numbered 80 ships. The human fleet that intercepted them numbered 60. By all standard calculations, the humans should have lost. They were unknown but clearly powerful. They had destroyed everything the Council threw at them. But humans did not fight by standard calculations. The battle lasted 4 hours. Human ships attacked in waves, closing to point-blank range where their mass drivers could punch through hulls. They accepted losses that would have broken any Council fleet. They pressed forward through clouds of debris that had once been their comrades. 31 human ships were destroyed. Over 3,000 humans died. But when the battle ended, all 80 vessels were drifting wreckage. They watched from their planet in stunned silence. The humans had saved them, without being asked, without any promise of reward. Humans had died to protect a species that had never shown them kindness. An official tried to hail the human flagship to express gratitude. The communication was ignored. Over the following months, human fleets appeared across the galaxy. They fought battles that seemed to follow no pattern. They protected some worlds and ignored others. They never responded to communications from anyone. Slowly, Council analysts began to understand the logic. Humans were not fighting to save the Council. They were fighting to save what they valued: libraries, museums, research stations, places that contained knowledge or art or culture that humans considered worth preserving. They saved a colony that held unique genetic research. They protected a moon that contained ancient stone carvings. They defended a small station at the edge of space where a single elderly alien had spent her life collecting folk songs from dying cultures. And they continued to ignore all attempts at communication. General Myra led her fleet in 17 major battles. She lost 2/3 of her original force. She never retreated. She never surrendered. She never explained her actions to anyone outside the human chain of command. When the last fleet was finally cornered and destroyed at the edge of known space, Myra's ship was one of only 40 human vessels still functional. She had been awake for 6 days straight. She had watched thousands of her people die. But they had won. The surviving Council species sent a delegation to humanity's capital. They came with gifts. They came with apologies. They came with offers of alliance, partnership, and everything they had 60 years before. President O received them in a garden. She was 91 years old, small and gray-haired, but her mind was sharp and her eyes missed nothing. She listened patiently as the delegates made their speeches. They praised human courage. They acknowledged past mistakes. They offered to welcome humanity into the council as full members with all rights and privileges. When they finished, smiled gently. "You misunderstand," she said. "We did not fight for you, we did not win for you, and we will not join you." The lead delegate, a young who had hatched after the fall of Nexus Prime, struggled to comprehend. "Then what do you want? What can we offer?" Considered the question for a long moment. "You laughed at our art," she said finally. "You dismissed our culture as worthless. You told us we had nothing to offer the galaxy." She gestured at the garden around them, flowers from 17 worlds, sculptures from human history, music playing softly in the background. "We spent 60 years proving you wrong. Not to you, to ourselves." She rose slowly, indicating that the meeting was ending. "Humanity does not need the Council's approval. We never did. We simply needed to remember that." The delegate was desperate now. "But surely we can work together. Surely after everything that has happened, we can build something new." Paused at the garden door. She thought about Ambassador Park, who had died 30 years ago, still waiting for an apology that never came. She thought about Doha, who had trained his granddaughter to remember everything. She thought about all the humans who had lived and died during the long silence. "You are welcome to visit our galleries," she said finally. "Our archives are open to all who approach with respect. Our hospitals will treat your sick. Our ships will defend the innocent." "And in return?" the delegate asked. President O smiled. It was a small expression, quiet and sad and somehow triumphant all at once. "Nothing," she said. "We offer these things because they reflect who we have chosen to be. That is what you failed to understand 60 years ago. Culture is not a trade good. Art is not a bargaining chip. They are the reasons we survive, the reasons we fight, the reasons we matter." She turned and walked away, leaving them alone in the garden surrounded by the fruits of humanity's long silence. The music continued to play. Somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, human ships patrolled the borders of known space. They watched for threats. They protected what they valued. They said nothing to anyone. But they remembered everything. And in the great archive that stretched across all human worlds, a new entry was added to the permanent collection. It was a simple recording, recovered from ancient files. It showed a small woman standing in a crystal hall while hundreds of aliens laughed at her. The recording ended with Ambassador Park walking toward the door, her back straight, her face calm. Below the recording was a single caption: "They laughed at us once, they will never laugh again." The archive preserved everything, including lessons that should never